The secret to Abraham's lively prayer life is his theological depth. The essence of this prayer is not asking for things for himself or just sort of shooting flares up or exploring his inner being. What makes this prayer what it is the sophisticated, profoundly theological nature of it. He is doing theological reasoning. He's doing theological arguing. He is focusing on the attributes of God. He is praying on the basis of the givens of God's nature. First of all, there's two things that he's putting his feet on. One thing he's talking about is one aspect of God's nature. The other foot is on another aspect of God's nature. And once he lays out his theological assumptions about who God is, he then pushes. And that's what makes the prayer what it is. See, he's reasoning. He's saying, if you're like this and if you're like that, then why couldn't we do this and why couldn't we do that? That's what makes this prayer so different. See, so vital, so alive, not rote, not formal, not vague. What are these two planks? First of all, he says in verse 25, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? That's a rhetorical question, which means it's a statement. Of course, God is a just God. That's the first thing. It's very important. Wow. No matter what else, one thing we know is a given. God is a God of justice. Abraham wants to get, he wants to get a reprieve for Sodom and Gomorrah, but one thing he knows is God is not going to shrug off his justice. He's a righteous God, and he better be. What hope is there? Look at the world. Look at the injustice. Look at all the wrongs that are being done, and it just keeps on happening. What hope is there for the world unless there's a God of justice who someday is going to put everything right? If there's no God of justice, there's no hope for the world. So God is a God of justice. But the other thing Abraham knows is what? That he's a God of grace. Because in verse 18 and 19, God tells Abraham, remember Abraham, verse 19, I chose you, verse 18, so that through you all the nations of the earth would be saved and blessed. I'm going to bring my salvation into the world through you and your family, Abraham. I've chosen you to be a blessing to the nations. And maybe when Abraham was chosen, he thought, I'm chosen because I'm a pretty good person. But by now, Genesis 18, he knows that's not true. He's let God down. He's failed God. He's failed to believe God. He's done all kinds of dumb things. And guess what? Here's God still coming to lunch. Here's God still coming and meeting with him face to face. And by now, Abraham knows God is a sparing God. He forgives, he pardons, he loves. He's a God of grace. So Abraham says, I know you're a God of justice, and that'll never go away. You can't shrug that off. But B, I also know you're a God of love, and you want to spare people, and you love the undeserving. And therefore, verse 24, Abraham does an exploration, a theological exploration that is amazing. And in it he says, verse 24, let me just read you the salient verbs and subjects and predicates. He says, O Lord, will you not spare the place for the sake of the righteous? Will you not spare the whole city for the sake of the few righteous? And here's how he's reasoning. He says, I am not saying to you, O Lord, you're righteous and they deserve judgment, but, just this once, wouldn't it be all right if you just sort of gave them a break, please? No. The God of all the earth must do right. He knows he can't do that. He can't say, oh God, lay aside your righteousness. But here's what he says. You love righteousness so much. Would it not be possible that if there was a little righteous minority, if there were a few righteous, you love righteousness so much, could you not, for your love of those righteous people, give a reprieve for the whole city? See, the argument is fascinating. He's being innovative. He's being theologically creative. He knows, for example, that sometimes the guilt of the few is imputed to the many. Is that not right? What if you're in a community or a family and one of your members or a few of your members do something violent and terrible? Don't we all feel responsible to some degree? Don't we all feel responsible? We should have seen it. We should have prevented it. Of course we do. Sometimes the unrighteousness of the few transfers and condemns the many. But, Abraham says, "Oh Lord, wouldn't it be possible that the righteousness of the few might transfer to and save the many?" See, is it possible that in spite of our bad record, you would love a righteous group of people in a city so much that for their sake, you would forgive everyone else? That way you could both be righteous God, honoring the righteous, but at the same time, saving the undeserving. Isn't that possible? And over and over and over again, when he says, couldn't the righteousness of one of these people over here save these unrighteous folks here? Couldn't it be imputed somehow to them? Couldn't there be some way in which it covers it? And over and over and over again, God says, yeah. And when God says yes, Abraham is astounded, and he says, okay, well, let me get this straight. You'd forgive that city for 50 righteous people? For the sake of 50 righteous people? And God says, yeah. How about 40? Yeah, says God. How about 30? Yes. It's getting exciting, isn't it? How about 20? Yes. How about 10? Yes. But then, in one of the most astounding places in the whole Bible, one of the most shocking, unexpected endings to a story in the whole Bible, Abraham goes home. He goes home. Good night. He had God on the ropes and he went home. What are we expecting him to do? What is the last question that we expect Abraham to come up with, which he never asks? We expect Abraham here at the very end to say, "Oh Lord, let me speak just once more. Would you save the whole city for the sake of one righteous person? Just one. Do you love righteousness so much that the righteousness of the one could be imputed to the whole and undeserving people be saved?" And we expect the Lord to say, "Yes, Abraham, I will save the city for one righteous person." But Abraham never asks the question, and God never gives the answer, and God goes down and judges the city, and the city's lost. Why? Here's why. Abraham knows he doesn't have a truly righteous person in that city. It's sure not Lot. If you know anything about the text, by reading the story, Lot would not fit the requirements. But guess what? Neither does Abraham, and he knows it. Abraham has found a path through impenetrable mountains. Do you know what those impenetrable mountains are? It's the ultimate problem. If there's no God of justice and righteousness, there's no hope for the world, right? We said that a minute ago. But if there is a God of justice and righteousness, oh my gosh, what hope is there for you and me? Because who can stand before him? And see, Abraham is trying to say, if God is a righteous God, what hope is there for us flawed human beings? And he found a path through. If we could just find one absolutely, truly righteous person, would not God, who loves righteousness, for the sake of his love of that righteous person, would he not save the many for the righteousness of the one? He's found a path through the mountains, but he can't walk it because he doesn't have the horses, because he doesn't have that one righteous person. But many centuries later, someone came along who could walk that path. Abraham prayed for the Sodom and Gomorrah, the undeserving city. He acted as a priest, did he not? He stood in front of God on behalf of the people, and he made intercession for them, but he couldn't pull it off. But get this, Abraham just prayed for people who might have killed him. That was pretty big of him. The Canaanites were always attacking him. He prayed for Sodom and Gomorrah. He prayed for people who might have killed him, but when Jesus Christ came as our ultimate high priest and went to the cross, he was praying for people who were killing him. Remember, he said, "Father, forgive them," as they struck him, for they don't know, they don't fully realize what they're doing. Abraham risked his life by going before God in order to save the people, but Jesus Christ gave his life. Abraham kept saying, "I'm representing these people, but don't be mad at me." But Jesus Christ represented us, and took the cosmic wrath of divine justice into his own heart. And what does that mean? That he paid the penalty for our sins. That one act of absolutely pure, perfect love was perfect righteousness. And now, finally, let's ask the question, oh Lord, would you save us undeserving people for the sake of one righteous man? And God's answer is yes, if it's him, and it is.